for the 1966 pantomime, which Jess Conrad was in, there was a charity football match which we organised, and that's it there, which Ian will probably have, which we can put it up in the exhibition, which you can peruse. But Tommy Steele flew in by helicopter for the game, and so it was against a gentleman sportsman side made up of Swansea gentlemen, obviously, and it was a smashing day. It was held by everybody then. I'll give you a little tale about Stan with his football side of it. We'd have matches. We'd have a Swansea pantomime football team, which composed of everybody from the call boy up to the top star, which was Stan Stennett, and we'd play on a Thursday, and we would play the local Thursday sides, like the fire service, David Evans, or any of the local Thursday sides. And one of Stan's favourite, he would, if the opposition had the ball, all of a sudden a whistle would go, and the game would stop, and Stan would say, "Joke time!" And we'd all go over and he'd tell a joke, and then of course then he'd have the ball by then, and the whistle, and then he'd blow the whistle, of course he had the ball, so off we go again. And another one that we wanted, kit to play. So somebody approached Swansea Town, as it was then, and they got no response from Swansea Town. No, they only wanted a second or third team kit, just kit to play. Couldn't get anything from Swansea. "Don't worry," he said. The next thing, a car pulls up the following day or a couple of days later. "Barry, come and give me a hand with this." A box of kit, Cardiff City's first or second team kit. And I never forgotten that day, because I was playing as well then, I had Derek Tapscott's shirt on, right, from Cardiff City. And another one, that show as well, he had crashed his plane. Stan had his own plane, and he had a problem with it. So we had and he showed us all the telegram that Harry Seacombe sent him, and all it said was, "Use stronger elastic." That's all that was said on it, and that is a fact as well. That was that particular year as well. But he was a great chap. He still is, because he's still going strong.
Yeah, very much so.
Still going strong.
Now, do you remember, obviously John Chilver's pantomime started in 62, 63, I think it was. You did some pantomimes prior to that, which would have been not in-house productions then.
Yeah.
Did you find them different?
Well, Rex Willis was the owner then. Now, Rex Willis was he was an ex-Welsh rugby international, and they owned the theatre. But they always were they were always a little bit strapped for cash. Oh, so they told you. So they told us. You would look at it and think, "Oh, Rex Willis," but he was an immaculate chap. All right? He would come through the theatre, but Ozzy Morris, that particular year, what was it? Let me think. That would be in 61, 62, Babes in the Wood. He had gout practically all the way through, and he never missed a show. He just carried on, and he would sit and he would prop his foot up, and he would carry on with the show. Great.
Difference then that John Chilvers wouldn't be involved in a director capacity then. So there would have been, because there would have been outside production companies bringing them in then, probably.
I can't remember.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah, it would have been.
His first one was with what's his help now?
Would his first one have been with Wayne Fontana?
No, it would have been before that. It's 61,
Wayne-
60, 62, 63.
Martin Wilde?
No, it's before that as well.
Before
It's
that as well. Before my time, no?
What do you
It's the
talking about?
50th it is, I'll tell you which one it is.
Well, Ozzy Morris was 61, 62.
So after that, it must be the one after that, then it's
Dick
Dick Whittington.
Whittington.
There we are, with
Johnny Stewart.
Johnny Stewart, that's it.
Yes, yeah.
That was the first one where the theatre totally produced it.
Produced their own, yeah.
Prior to
Well, we're
that,
talking about Rex, well, as Barry's just said now about them sort of being most of the time strapped for cash. Because, I mean, I think at one point Rex wanted actually to turn the theatre into a bingo hall, didn't he?
Yeah.
well,
because
they,
there
they
was
actually
more-
had planning permission to do it.
Because there was
Sorry,
more money
they
in
had
that
approached,
yeah.
but the council wouldn't let them do
No,
it.
which was just as well. Otherwise, neither of us would be sitting here now.
No, we would be, we would be on top of the bus station.
Yes, we would. But what I was going to say was when Barry said that they were strapped for cash, and I can imagine they most probably were. But that hung over as well to the period when I first started down here, when the council owned it. And Con was working here, obviously, with Rex Willis as well. And when we used to fit the sets up at that point, and sometimes you'd have to nail some of the sets together, pieces, whatever. So you'd get your hammer and you'd get your nails, and Con would tell you where things went, and you put it up and you'd nail it together. Then when it came to striking the set at the end of the show, or the end of the series, or whatever season, and you took all the nails out, you had to keep the nails, because you then had to spend about half an hour, 20 minutes, somebody would spend, one of the boys with a short straw, sitting on the corner of the stage, straightening all the nails out, so that we could use them again for the next day.
Wow.
And heavens above, you virtually had to put in a written application to throw a nail away if you couldn't straighten it. Because, and that was the way it, that had carried on for quite a couple of years anyway, into the council era, because of course they didn't know any different, and obviously the purse strings were tight, because they didn't want to throw public money at the theatre willy-nilly if they didn't know where it was going. But eventually then they got to decide, well, all right, yes, you can't keep reusing nails forever, you've got to buy a new box.
Well, health and safety now would
Well, it wouldn't allow you to straighten them out, would it?
It's someone's job.
Could hit my thumb, as I did many a time.
There's a claim coming on you, I can see it coming.
Yeah.
Talking of which, actually, I'm going to bring that up, is none of you were really employed by the council at that point, where you were
you said,
casual and...
What was he talking to?
Is he talking to Wasn't there Mickey Mouse? There was Minnie Mouse.
Who's told you such stories? Don't believe
we were everybody. I don't think it was only
26
Con
years they can
Murphy.
go
Only
back
Con
to the
Murphy.
tax
Only Con Murphy was the.
Well, Bill
employee.
Payne, the electrician, yes.
Oh no, the chap who in my day was with the dog. Ted.
Oh, he used to do the gods afterwards. He used to work in the gods. Let him in and out.
Ted Lawson.
Ted Lawson. That's right.
In actual fact, Ted Lawson, who was the electrician in the early 60s, and his wife and his daughter and the actual dog used to be all involved in it. He met an untimely death with 4 or 5 of them went to Ilfracombe on a boat, and they were told not to attempt to go back, and they decided to go back, and they've never ever found anybody or the boat ever since. That was
It's a happy thought.
Well, I was gonna say,
yes, but anyway.
Pantomime is normally cheery, but
yes, but that was Ted Lawson. But Ted Lawson was the chief electrician. He was employed.
Yeah, but as you say, Liam, no, most of us were names and numbers.
Yeah.
It was the only way they could get staff at that time, because
Yeah.
it was sort of hit and miss, and you were paid the cash at the end of the week.
And no brown envelopes then with the
As we
names.
said, no, as we
Well,
said,
it's like the guys across the road. I mean, the guys across the road would be fancy show boys, and what was it, sort of like 2 and 9? Or
well, when I first started, it was 2 and 6 a show, I think.
2 and 6 a show.
2 and 6 a show for 3
Yeah.
hours. I mean, you're not working for the full 3 hours, obviously,
No.
but you're working for most of it. You used to get 2 and 6, which was what, 12 and a half pence.
That's right. Yeah.
And then it went up to
Raised
5
capital
shillings.
was, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then it went up to 5 shillings, and then it went up to 7 and 6 eventually.
Did you find that obviously the pantomimes would be 2.5 hours long in those days, wouldn't they? Did you find that sometimes your concentration would go because you needed to be on your game, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, a story about losing your concentration goes back again. I mean, we keep going back to Stan Stennett's pantomime, but I mean, it's just one of those things. We were talking about the Falcons that did the slosh act. In the slosh act, they're supposed to be hanging wallpaper, and then of course they fall down the wallpaper and they get all the mess with the paste and one thing and another. Usual thing. Well, then the part of it was they'd walk up this ladder to go hang the wallpaper, and then working up the flies, we were supposed to drop in a rather large spider, right? Come down on the rope and frighten him, and he'd fall off the ladder, and the slosh and the paint would go everywhere. Well, yes, you would lose your concentration because you'd be sitting upstairs in the flies and you'd be having a chat and sitting there and somebody would be saying about what was happening last night or what was on the TV or what you were talking about, one thing or another, and then somebody go, and you didn't hear the voice then, oh, I thought I saw a spider.
Quite like
So you'd go, and you'd run over to the side and then drop the spider. Oh yes, there's the spider I thought I saw, you would say. And then you'd come downstairs and you would go ballistic then. You didn't drop the spider and you forgot to drop it. Sorry, we'll make sure it goes in. And then of course it would work all right for the next couple of nights. And then the same thing would happen again, you know. And in the end, towards the end of the season then, we would get a little bit fed up. And especially if we were short-staffed, short-handed up there. And perhaps you were the only one while the other guy nipped off to the loo or somewhere. And you just lean over the rails and welter him to come up the ladder and then go, it's not coming in.
The flies must have been a really clean and hygienic place to work.
It had to be the cleanest, the most hygienic place in the world apart from Dante's Inferno.
You would never believe it. You would never believe it. The girls, you could hear the girls coming down the wooden stairs from the dressing rooms upstairs. It would be like a herd of elephants. And you'd hear them clink on, just coming down over the stairs, like that. And if you didn't have the pass door closed, you could hear it in the auditorium. Yeah. It was unbelievable. And it was antiquated, wasn't the word, was it?
No, it was.
Right? There was no washing up facilities, there was nothing. Washing, you had to use, beg, steal or borrow afterwards, you would be asked in to wash your hands and face.
Well, there was.
That was in the office.
Out the boiler room, which was then classed as the green room. Yeah.
That's right.
And that would be the worst green room in any theatre in the country because it was a boiler room.
The square bowl.
There was a sink there which was made of timber.
That's right.
It was a timber sink, built sink with a cold water tap, and that was all it had.
Yeah.
And you used to have to try and wash it. And the scenic designers and that would work in there as well.
Yeah, so the props room.
It was the props room as well.
We'd be making the props in there as well. You know, everything, and then the boys on the stage would have to come off and wash and hands and face and to go out afterwards.
So with the slosh scene, was it that had to be cleaned up every night then?
Yes.
Yeah, it was
Barry's job.
It was my job. It was a tarpaulin we had to make fresh slosh. Every night.
What would that consist of?
It would consist of a mixture of soap and then and warm water, and then it was a compound that the Falcons used to give us, and
top secret.
It was top secret. In other words, it was whatever it was. We used to add to it
colouring. That was all.
And colouring, and then we'd make different buckets for the show, and we would put tarpaulin down, and then we'd have to take the tarpaulin off and hose it
the back and wash, or take it out the street. Hose
it down. Take it straight out of the street, hose it down, or wash it, throw buckets of water over it, and then dry it.
So that would be done a couple of times a day then, on some cases?
2 shows a day, if it was back in the day, yeah. Yes, it was, talking about antiquated, it was unbelievable, wasn't it? You couldn't wish for a worse place.
There wasn't a great deal of space behind the scene, the stage area then to work. Yeah. As you were saying, going back to what you were saying about the fly floor, when you worked up there, I mean, that was the dirtiest place to work because the floor was just covered in the rope, you know, the excess ends of the ropes then that we used to hold the scenery in and out. And they'd lain there for years. I mean, some of which must have been, I don't know, 30, 40 years old.
So would you
You've never seen a fly floor the old-fashioned fly floors here,
Yeah.
when it was something. If you could look at an old-fashioned boat, a whaling or not a whaling boat, a sailing boat, you know,
Yeah.
with the three-masted sailing boat, with all the ropes tied around that. That's exactly what it was like.
Yeah.
And they had to uncut it all.
It was all done by hand.
Yeah, it was all done by hand.
Would you wear gloves then, or?
No.
So
You try
imagine
it,
a fair few burns.
You try it with gloves when you first started because you don't want to get my hands dirty or scarred or anything. But you just couldn't get enough grip on the rope, so
Because you had to haul them up.
haul them up. And then you'd run it out and you'd run it through the cleat, so you'd have to hang on and let the rope run through your hand as well then. Of course, if it ran through a bit too sharply, you'd end up with rope burns.
Yeah.
But then you'd end up with calluses on your hands then, sort of pulling...
And would that be heavy? Would that be manual work? That
Oh, it would be really manual work,
Yes, without any shadow. And then when the counterweights came in, it was
it's joy then, wouldn't it? Because you could do it. But going back again to Curries Waltzing Waters, the back cloth that they had, which I said, was there to stop the back wash of the water when they were up there, that would get absolutely drenched, and that filled the whole side of the back of the stage, height-wise and width-wise. And with that used to be have to hold out at the end of the waters and would be soaking wet. And then it would drip and drip and drip back into the tank for the rest of the show until I don't think it ever dried out because it would have been too wet. And that took some pulling out. And if we were short-staffed up there on a matinee because people didn't turn up because they couldn't get time off work or school or whatever, then they were left to three of you to try and pull it out. Yeah. Which was a job and a half.
And there was no...
You'd ask every so often for Barry to come up and give you a hand, but he was always doing something else.
I was always, yes.
You're always busy at that
somebody
point.
would break a prop or something, One of the props would be...
Well, there were only two ways to get up to the fly floor, and that was one from the back stairs, which had a ladder which was about 7 foot high, I suppose, and they screwed to the wall. And then you'd go through a small door opening, which unfortunately would have been easier if it had opened into the fly floor, but then it opened out. So you used to have to hang on, open the door, and then climb in. Or the other side was from the far corner, which was a ladder that went straight from the floor, the stage floor, straight up into the fly floor, and through an opening on the fly floor.
It's amazing that nobody fell off on them, isn't it?
You go straight up there.
It's amazing that nobody fell off them.
Well, it is amazing. I mean, all the years I've worked here, nobody actually ever fell off it, never saw an accident. And you used to run up and down that ladder like Billy Whiz sometimes if you were late for a queue, because that was the quickest way. If you'd been over the volunteers and were missing your queue, you'd have to come in, run round the back of the pantomime set, get to the ladder, straight up the ladder, which was, as I say, vertical and nailed to the wall, and was up about, whatever it was it 20, 30 foot, I suppose, for a fly floor. And you'd run straight up there as fast as you could, because otherwise if you missed it, sometimes it was more than your life was worth. Especially if you wanted to work the next show.
Yes, that's right.
Talking of these specialities, because I remember Paul and Barry Denver, and I know you... I remember he had to get out of a straitjacket while suspended from the flies. How was that achieved?
Well, we used to just drop a line down, which would have been, the cloths were on bars, always held on 3 lines, short, centre and long, over the side of the stage, and we drop a centre line down then, just a single one, and he'd had the harness fitted to that to strap around his feet, which his partner did, and then we just, shearman, pull him up then to the height that he wanted, and tie the rope off, and then leave him hanging there till he did his bit, well he wiggled out of it and did his Harry Houdini bit again.
Did he always get out?
He always got out as far as I know, yes. I didn't work the show where he didn't get out. And from working up there I found out how they do the magic box trick as well.
Go on, you can tell me this, go on. Magic circle will be in touch.
No, I can't tell you what magic circle. But that was the thing, when you see the one where somebody's locked inside the box, inside the bag, and it's all chained up, and then the assistant stands on the top and lifts the cloth up, and then drops the cloth and it's the other guy. So when you're right up on the fly floor and you're looking down, you can see exactly how it works. But I can't tell you.
Sworn to secrecy.
My lips are sealed.
Sworn to secrecy.
No. Again,
and also during that run, Paul Denver did something which got him into the Guinness Book of Records. if you remember.
Yes,
Barry knows about
actually, this will be of interest to any of the people that come along to the exhibition that actually witnessed the show down. It was held on Swansea Beach, and they had a crane, and they winched him up to 400 foot, because the current time, the Guinness Book of Records current height world record was 300 and something odd.
90, wasn't it?
300 and just over 300 foot, and they winched him up to 400 foot, and he got out of it.
I'd like to bring in Jon Dabbs, who was backstage from 1970 to 74, 75 period. Can you tell me what you did and what sort of how interesting it was for you at that point?
We originally came in, I was about 14, I suppose. I can still remember missing Wednesday afternoons off school to come and work here. In the limes, which is the spotlights, basically right up the top and the back, which are the old-fashioned type of limes, carbon arc, which were all hand operated. You had to keep the two carbons X amount distance apart to get the brightest light on them. Which was all hand done, wasn't motorised, it was all hand done, so you had to change them over as well, because they burnt down quite quickly throughout the show. We said change them once or twice throughout the show.
Through each show?
Yeah. So a couple of times you get thrown across the room by haulers, basically, not turning them off while you're changing them to try and save a bit of time, but it all worked out. It all worked out very well.
Brilliant, good. And I want to bring Alan in just for a second, just to talk about you mentioned the Curries Waltzing Waters.
Oh yeah, with the Stan Stennett show.
How was that transported to Swansea, and how difficult was it to put together?
That was my first full show, pantomime, and we were on what's called a get-in, where you actually get all the scenery delivered. Most of it at that time came direct by lorry to the stage door in Princess Street, as it was then, and you just unload it and load it in. Curries Waltzing Waters was slightly different. We were told by Con that morning that we were going up to High Street Station to pick up some scenery. None of us actually knowing what Curries Waltzing Waters were, because we'd never seen it before.
Oh, right.
And then when we got up there was a great big flatbed, I don't know whether they're 8 or 10 or 12 wheeler sort of trucks on the line that the train had just brought in, with all the equipment on that. They were basically sort of like scaffolding poles, anything up to about, I can't remember, Barry, they fitted together, didn't they? So
Yeah, slotted in.
10 or 20 feet in length, and then they came in two sort of sections, fitted them together to fill the whole stage. And these were, some of them were sort of preset already in troughs. So you're talking about a 20-foot trough by about 2 foot by about 3 foot, full of scaffolding pipes. So that's the offloaded. Yeah. And I can't remember how many of those were up there. It couldn't have been more than about 10, I would have thought. Loading those off the train, carrying them then through the exit yard of the train station and onto flatbed lorries then that one of the local hauliers supplied us with. And they came down here, and then you had to offload them here and then put it and take them into the theatre, and then I can't remember.
Well, that's what the get-in is about. You get it in, the set in, and after the end of the pantomime, it's a get-out. But of course, you used to be paid extra for that, wasn't it? But of course, it was a job and finish. So the quicker you did the job, the quicker you got home to bed. And so consequently, this particular night was a bit of a
struggle to get all that out.
And the effect of it to the audience, was that quite impressive? And how did they create the effect?
The effect was fantastic, actually. I mean, I don't think anybody in Swansea had seen anything like it, you know. With all these pipes connected, I believe, I'm not too sure, but I believe it was connected, or should I say it was connected up to the fire hydrant, I think, because I'm going to get the water pressure for it all, for a main supply to fill all those pipes. Unfortunately, I can't remember the guy's name that ran it all for the full season, but the control board, whereas you sort of see control boards today as sort of large boxes of electronic little switches, you know, like light switches and that, these things were sort of 3 or 4 inch rods of metal with a great big Baker-like door handle stuck on the top of it. And these things, he just ran up and down the control board, pulling all these levers.
A young chap, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a young guy, curly hair.
Yeah,
got the photograph. But,
yeah, in actual fact, I think, Ian, you have the name of, in the book here, somewhere along the line, the write-up on, you know, what the name are.
John Curry. I think his name was
Curries,
John Curry.
that's right.
It was Curries Waltzing Waters.
That's right.
But yeah, it was a really spectacular thing that finished the first.
And would that be coloured then? The water?
Yeah,
how would they create the colour water?
The water would be clear water, obviously, which these days I suppose they use coloured waters. But it was all done then with by the electric staff. Sorry, John, you weren't here then.
No, I wasn't here then, no.
Yeah.
But I think it was Billy Payne actually was the electrician at the time, I believe. And they were all done by coloured lights then, and gels in front and behind the water fountains, so that they created the light illusion then reflecting on it.
Did you ever get any leaks?
As it happened, not any that I can remember. I don't think we did. I mean, apart from the odd dribble of water. The worst part, if you're talking about leaks, was when we had to take it all apart to get it out.
That's right.
Because it was all the pipe was when we brought it in, of course, the pipe was empty. When we took it all out, it was still full of water. So if you tipped one end of the trough up a little bit more, then the person on the other end used to get a deluge of it, which isn't very good at about 2 o'clock in the morning.
No, that's right. That's
when you're
right.
trying to finish to get home.
That's right.
It was, I think, one of the most spectacular. I know that last year, I didn't see it, but last year they said about the 3D.
The 3D effect is quite effective, very effective.
But, you know,
but a lot easier to get in.
Oh yeah, a lot easier to get in and get out than this was, I can tell you. Because it filled the whole of the backstage area and had to stay there for the full, whatever it was, 16, 18 weeks, 20 weeks of the pantomime.
Did you get a chance to work together on the Aladdin when we had the power cuts and everything else?
Oh, yes.
You all worked on that?
Yeah, we all worked that.
You must have some great stories on that then.
Car headlamp bulbs,
That was it, yes.
Car headlamp bulbs.
John was out to work then with his lives because they didn't work.
They didn't work, so we're in the auditorium with these car headlamp bulbs. Amazing.
You were sitting up in the boxes and the gods then.
That's right, in the boxes and the gods, yeah. And in the circle as well.
And where did you source them from?
What year was that?
Scrapyards.
71, 72.
71,
Phil Payne was the
that's
one
right.
who sourced them all.
Oh, the
But where he
foremost,
got
yes,
them
of
from, I
course.
don't know. No idea.
Car batteries they
Yeah,
used.
all car batteries and car headlamp bulbs.
Con had managed from the council to get hold of a Land Rover with a built-in generator, which was parked in Princess Street outside the golf course.
Yes, I remember.
So that would start running for most of the electrics that were needed on stage. But the rest of it we had, well, the boys that were working the electrics, you were up in the gods
car headlamp
with car headlamps, gloves on, asbestos gloves to stop the heating, and a car battery. And you'd run it off a 12 volt, and when that ran out, you'd have to run downstairs and get another one.
Yeah.
And all power to the people that sang in that show, and that was Barry Hopkins, Nicky Stevens from Brother of the Man,
Nicky Stevens from Brother of the Man, of course.
and the Foremost,
All
sang live without any without any amplification.
Yeah.
Because when the lights went out, the power went out. Everything.
Yeah.
And they were still packed houses.
They're still packed out.
Yes.
So in the auditorium, would they have lights in the auditorium? Obviously no lights in the auditorium either. There would be.
Pressurettes with torches. That was all.
Wow.
Yeah.
Duracell would have been made of money.
That was a fabulous...
Duracell, yeah.
As it happens, that particular show was one of the best shows that I've ever worked with, the Foremost and Nicky Stevens.
Yeah.
It was superb.
And Noel Talbot as well was in
Noel
it.
Talbot again,
Yes.
he's a Swansea guy.
Yes.
You see, everybody, because of that particular incident with the lighting, everybody mucked in, and there was no animosity. Absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, it was one of the best shows I'd ever worked.
Yeah.
So what about the ice cream? How did they keep that cool?
That I do not know.
They got I don't know whether it was I don't know whether the fish market. Yeah, the fish market would have still been there, and Con Murphy with his contacts virtually everywhere in Swansea did it when it's something. Con knew somebody to get it. I think they used to get blocks of ice from the fish stores, the fish market, fetch it up and put those in the bottom of the ice cream, the fridges or freezers, and keep the ice cream that way.
Do you have memories following that then with Ryan and Ronnie?
Oh yeah, plenty. I mean,
Great guys.
I think that what great parties, yeah.
Yeah,
They both certainly like their parties, didn't they? There
Yeah.
wasn't a problem there.
absolutely.
And down Ryan's
Fabulous
house
guy.
as well, when he
Yeah.
bought the house down Langland.
That's right, I remember
They
that.
were all down there. And, you know, I mean, there was no side with them at all. Everybody was there. You could, you know, you were in and out of their dressing room all the time.
What I liked about Ryan and Ronnie, whenever I knew, where we all had calls to go in and out of the dressing rooms at some time during the show, myself a bit more particularly because I was doing the props, if they were speaking Welsh and they knew that you couldn't speak Welsh, they would switch to English straight away. He was an absolute gent. Well, the pair of them were, really, but Ryan, absolutely gent through and through. I remember going to a do, which in actual fact I won a book, which is was given to me and presented to me by Ryan and Ronnie in this particular show, a do. And Ryan was asked to pick out the prizes, pick out the winning prizes. Now this was in a pub, which was on the Kingsway, just up the road to the Grand Theatre. Peter Davies, the Welsh Football International, owned it, and it was called the Prince of Wales, and it was upstairs, and the place was absolutely packed. What did Ryan do? Before he got on the chair, because he wasn't very big, before he got on the chair to pull out the winning numbers, he took his shoes off. Now, how many people would do that in a blinking do when half the people have been having a few eats and drinks, but he took his shoes off, and that summed him up. He was a gent, absolutely through and through.
I hear lots of people talking about the volunteer arms. Have you got any memories of that place?
Too many.
Some I can
Too
bring,
many.
some I can't.
Too many.
I think the biggest thing with the volunteers, although Barry was down there before I started,
Yes.
as I said. But
If I can come in with one absolute classic, which I actually was witnessed as well, it was the Wayne Fontana, which is I've got
68, 69.
68, Jack and the Beanstalk, and he had a spot at the end, or towards the end of the pantomime, where the princess was supposed to be sleeping on a mound, and there was a portcullis. And Wayne Fontana's number was The Impossible Dream from La Mancha. And he was singing this, and when he drew his sword, and he would sing in this, whilst he was singing the song, he would touch the portcullis, and the portcullis would rise slowly. This particular show, he was singing away, and he touched it, and he touched it again, and he touched it again, and then somebody looked up the flies, and it was completely empty. They were all over the volunteers having a pint. They had missed their cue. So there was one hell of a dash. John Chilvers, everybody was flying up because in those days it was operated on the pulley by hand, and you had a fly floor of about 8 men.
Yeah.
8 men, fly floor, and they were all over the volunteers having a pint. That was a classic with Wayne Fontana. That was just one classic, the volunteers.
I'll give you another one with the volunteers who were involved in it. Got on to a couple of years onwards was, I think it was Cinderella. The Cinderella show. And when, as you know, Barry's just talking about working in the flies, because that's where all the cloths are dropped in from, you know. So we were up there, we were working up there, about 5 of us this afternoon. No, it was an evening show it was. And after the show, the full stage was open with the act, whatever was going on, the scene that was on there. It would go into blackout, and the idea was then there was a cloth dropped in at the front of the stage, which cut off the back end so that the boys could reset the next scene, and that the following scene then went on in front of it. So the cloth would be dropped down in a complete blackout. So you'd have a cue from the stage manager. You'd have a red light to warn you to get hold of the rope. Green light, drop the cloth in as quickly as you can and as safely as you can. The cloth came in this day, and I can't remember the young lady's name that was playing Cinderella at the time, but she was a little bit too far down stage when she stepped back to allow the cloth in, and it caught her glancing blow on the top of the head, just on her forehead, and she sort of fell backwards. The cloth came into the floor, and of course there was sheer panic at the back while everybody's wondering how injured this girl was. As it happened, she wasn't really injured, it was just a nasty bump on the head, but she was all right. But anyway, before we knew all this, Con was shouting and screaming up to the flies to get down whoever dropped the cloth in, which I must say wasn't me. I won't mention any names, but the person that had dropped the cloth in went down the stairs and he was white as a sheet. Oh, what's happened, what's happened? Con shouting and screaming around, look what you've done, you dropped the cloth in too quickly, couldn't you see what was happening? Well, we couldn't see what was happening because it was pitch black. Anyway, he said to this lad, he said to him, look, he said, do us a favour, go with the volunteers quickly, he said, and get a brandy. Meaning, obviously, for the girl. 20 minutes later, this boy's still not back. So he comes back in about half hour later and Con says, where's the brandy? He said, oh, I didn't fetch it home. He said, I drank it while I was over there. He thought Con had sent him over to get one for himself.
Yes, yeah. And again with the volunteers.
It seemed to be a bit of a popular place,
yes,
this one.
Oh, yeah, it was the theatre pub. The foremost, whenever they weren't on stage, you could find them in the volunteers because they would have their full makeup on, their full outfits on, and all they would do would put a top coat on and go across the road into the volunteers and have a pint. And then somebody would come over and say, 5 minutes, boys, and they would put a pad on top of a mat on top of their pints, go over, do the show, and then come back and finish the pint off. And that is a fact, Ian.
Well, not only them, but a lot of the actors.
A lot.
But it was the pub, and I mean everybody that was over there, the locals that were over there, knew all the people from the theatre, and the people from the theatre knew everybody in the local. And I mean, it comes to something when you're standing there having a drink and somebody sort of thinks they've had a drop too many, when passing the hatch at the back of the bar, you see a horse's head.
Yeah.
Because the landlady's daughter used to own a horse which they kept up the back. And to get from the front to the back there, to go through the passage at the back of the bar.
Yeah, that is a fact. And another one that Wayne Fontana was involved in, because he seemed to be involved in everything. That when he was doing the pantomime here, he was an outstanding guy, but he was always involved in something or other. John Chilvers came through, he didn't come into the volunteers, because it wasn't very often that you see John Chilvers in the volunteers. But Wayne Fontana, he would always have a sing-song in the volunteers, and Wayne Fontana was getting up now and he started singing these numbers, and then it was, somebody had got back to John Chilvers that the numbers he was doing was for the forthcoming pantomime, because this was just pre-pantomime opening. Of course, John Chilvers wasn't very pleased with about that, because he said to Wayne Fontana, we haven't opened the show yet and you're singing the numbers. So anyway, but that was typical of Wayne Fontana. Fabulous guy. Also, with Stan being there, you could always have tremendous fun, because he was a real football fanatic through and through. We used to play football on the stage, we would strike the set, and before we set it, it would be a completely empty stage, and he'd have all the stage hands, he included, and the pantomime people, like at the time was, let me think now, Alan Taylor, who was famed from Mr. and Mrs. And we would have a kick around on the stage, and then then Con Murphy, the stage manager, would come on. He'd be screaming, come on, get the set up, and you would then finish, all pile into Stan's dressing room, have a quick wash, only one wash hand basin, but we'd all queue up, we'd have a wash our hands, face, and go out, set up the stage, and away we go for the pantomime.
Do you remember any speciality acts specifically from that sort of period, which you don't really see speciality acts today as you did then?
Yes. In 61, 62, Babes of the Wood, we've got Ozzy Morris was headlining that one, and he suffered from gout during that year, and but he persevered. I don't think he missed the show, but he used to come on with his foot bandaged up, and he would be limping around, but he was a great, as Ozzy Morris would be, tremendous trooper. During that show, there was Heinz and the Chimpanzees and his wife Barbara. Now they lived in a caravan which was up where the quadrant is now, and there was and it was just parked on the wasteland there, and he used to rehearse all the chimpanzees, and then he would bring them in here and he would do the show, and then straight back to the caravan, and that was the speciality act for Babes in the Woods of the following year, 61, 62. Babes in the Wood, of course. The other one...
Can I just interrupt this?
Certainly, yeah.
You were just saying about Stan with somebody walking on the stage that wasn't supposed to be there. I don't know whether you remember this. When Stan, later on in 69, did Robinson Crusoe. Yes. You were working then, if you remember, we had Curries Waltzing Waters at the back of the stage, and there was a big backcloth. And they came on at the end of the first half, to close the first half. Yeah. And you remember Tommy Short? Little Tommy Short, who was the day man then. Short by nature, and short, yes. Yeah, and short-sighted. Short-sighted. Because he wanted to get from one side of the stage to the other.
Because he was caught short?
Yeah, no, not because he was caught short, but he had to go over there ready to clean up, I think. It was because I think the Slosh Act or something may have opened the second half.
That's right, I got that down, Slosh, funny enough.
And he was walking from one side of the stage to the other. Instead of walking behind the backcloth, he walked in front of the backcloth, which at the time was an underwater scene, so you had all the dancing girls in their in-flight underwater outfits, and Tommy Short with a mop and bucket walking straight across the back of the set.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that was the Falcons.
That was
did the slosh. The Falcons did the slosh. And actually, he was from Swansea, or she was from Swansea. One of them was from Swansea. I think but the slosh, as the props, being on with the props, we had to make this slosh, which was basically what everybody, the bucket of stuff used to be put over the head, and we'd put tarpaulin down, and then it would be done, wouldn't it? You know?
Yeah,
but that's great. That was loads and loads of things. One of the things that we would do again, which would wind Jon Chilvers up, because he was one of these guys who flew off the handle very, very quickly. You know, anything wrong. The girls, the lineup of the girls when they opened the show up would be very similar to the Tiller Girls, where they would do one number with a flick of the leg, right? And of course, the skirts would be going past like that. And the last one out, you'd put a peg on it, you see? Just clip a peg on it, and as she was going dancing and kicking, the peg would be going back and forth, and of course the audience could see all this now, and they would be laughing. And everybody would be singing. But then, next thing, the stage door would fly open, and Jon Chilvers would be screaming at everybody, "Who put that damn peg on that girl?" And everybody would be gone, because nobody would admit to anything. But that was just one of the things, you know.
But they were long running in those days as well, weren't they? We were talking 3 months in some cases. Exactly. So I guess you would get bored, and pranks would certainly come up.
Well, I don't know. You wouldn't really get bored, would you? Because there was always something. Because the cast themselves were always sort of changing, especially people like Stan Stennett, or Dave Swan, or people like that. They would get generally bored themselves, so they'd be changing little bits of it. There wasn't too much. One of the things that I remember sticks in my mind that we did in the flights, was for one of the charity shows. I don't think we did it with Stan's show, but after a couple of years after that, the last night, not the last night of the pantomime, they used to have a pantomime on a Sunday night for charity. Remember? Yep. And we would do it. This was the one with Aladdin when we were talking about the Foremost and that. And of course, at the end of the first scene, at the end of the first act was Barry Hopkins, who was a great lad, a lovely boy, and a great character to work with, but couldn't always see the funny side of a joke if it was sort of aimed at him too much, you know. Anyway, at the end of the first act, he was in the cave, the enchanted cave, looking for the lamp. And this, we wouldn't have done this obviously on an ordinary show, but we did it for the charity show because people expected things like this. So he walks to the back of the stage now, and the spotlight comes on the lamp, and you can see the lamp, and he's going, so words of sort of, oh, look at this nice lamp, I wonder what this lamp can do, and all that. And he's just about to grab it, but unknown to him, while we were setting it up, I'd attached a thread from the lamp to the catwalk that ran from one side of the stage to the other, up at the fly floor. And I was standing up there, looking down, and every time he went to grab the lamp, of course I just lifted it about 3 foot in the air, and he was trying to grab it, and then he couldn't reach it. And then he'd stand back, and he'd say, I'm sure I saw a lamp here somewhere, and the lamp would come back down. And then he was getting to a point of, I'm running out of things to say here, so for heaven's sake, put this lamp back, like, you know. But it was quite hysterical. And then another one, when he did Babes in the Wood, he played Robin Hood. And they had this grotesque horse that used to come on stage, a dummy horse for him to end the first act with. And he used to get on to this horse with a bit of help from somebody, because you'd have to give him a leg up to get on it, this great big horse. And they'd be standing there, and he'd sing the song that finished the act. And then the curtain would come down, and then all the stage hands would come on, ready to strike the set for the second half. And
that was Ryan's last panto. Ryan's last panto with Brandy.
Glenn Hughes.
Golden Brandy.
Glenn Houston.
Golden
Brandy, yeah.
That's right.
Tim Raffles.
So he's sat on this horse now, and of course the idea was that when the curtain came down, somebody then go and help him get off the horse. Well, this day nobody bothered. They were all going on and changing scenery and putting flats on and bits of scenery ready for that, and Barry's still sitting there going, anybody going to let me off this horse? And people going, anybody hear a voice? Isn't there somebody around here? So Robin Hood got lost or something, and you know, but things like that. They were quite,
I understand you've got some interesting stories about the old fire curtain.
Yep. We all sort of remember the fire curtain as it was, or the safety curtain that was put down before, as soon as the show finished, the safety curtain would come in right at the end, and then before the show would start, obviously it would go up. And then the tabs, which are the curtains, as everybody knows them, they would open and the show would start. But the beauty of it
used to be wound up by hand, didn't it?
It did.
Right.
It was, yes.
Because everything else, the front of house tabs, as they are on a counterweight.
On a counterweight.
But that used to have to be wound by hand.
Yeah.
On a great big drum to wind this. It's an asbestos curtain that drops in just to see.
Yeah.
So if there's a fire backstage, it doesn't spread immediately to front of house and vice versa. But it had to be dropped in at the end of every show, and then taken out before the next show started.
Well, how old was that one then?
Well, that would have been in there from the time the theatre was built.
It was a very old one, because everybody, as I was saying to the boys here, and they all remember putting their names on it, everybody put their names on the fire curtain. You didn't put it on every year, but you put it on once it was on there, but the amount and the people, that's names that was on that fire curtain was unbelievable. And so it's another thing that the Swansea Council has got rid of, and can never come back.
Wow, that would never be done.
What names were on that, and it was just, you could just walk across the stage and read the names, and
the artists
and not only artists, people who were backstage, stage setters, everything.
So when do you think that was changed then?
I think that must have been taken down, I presume it's not still there, but I'm sure they must have a safety curtain at some point. But possibly it was taken down when the council closed the theatre for the
major
big refurbishment.
Yeah,
when they
so the early 80s then, 82.
Early 80s, that would have gone.
Wow, that's quite sad. It'd be interesting to see if, I'm guessing that's in a tip somewhere, or gone, long gone.
Oh yeah,
well, quite sad. That would be quite
I don't think it would have found it in a tip.
It's not there now, because
I would have been taken away and disposed of rather carefully. But
well, I'd never heard that story before.
Yeah, that's a fact. That is a fact. Absolutely, everybody and anybody who was through the theatre used to put their names
And
on.
depending on how much time and how much paint you had, depending on how much of the actual fire curtain you took up with your name. Because if God only wanted you to put your name on there, he didn't want anything else. But there were some people who must have been doing it overnight because they had letters about that day on their names.
Yes. Con Murphy was quite willing for these sort of things to happen, as long as it didn't go over the top.
It didn't affect the show, didn't affect the
That's
theatre,
right,
and it didn't
that's
go over
right.
the top. Oh, he's a classic man to work with.
Yeah.
I can't say work for, although he was our boss, because you always worked with him, didn't you? You never saw him as a boss.
Can't, yeah.
He
No.
was always, you know,
Yeah.
although he knew he was the main man for the theatre, stay backstage. He was so good to work with, so good to work, you know, so you're working with him rather than for him.
Yeah.
Talking about the number of the many performances that you've all been involved with, just want to bring the lights back in again because it interests me a lot. There is any mistakes you made that you felt the pressure on afterwards?
Ryan used to shout a couple of times, yes, when we were messing about up there. Because we were only 15, 16 when we were doing this, and you could get blinded sometimes by actually looking at them, not through the filter. And you couldn't see the stage at all for about 5-10 minutes. So you just had to go with it, you know, hoping you were on him.
So you'd have the artist one side of the stage and
No,
you
I
were
really
like
did,
the
yeah.
other side.
When he moved, it was basically, you couldn't see him moving. It was...